Welcome. Tonight, we will travel back in time together to an age of candlelight and shadow, where towns were small and the world beyond your village seemed vast and unknowable. Our focus will be on a moment in history both dreaded and transformative, the arrival of the Black Death in the 14th century. This was not merely a single event, but a sweeping wave that passed through cities, villages, and countrysides across Europe, leaving a changed world behind it. Tonight, we will not look at this past in haste or fear, but rather with a quiet curiosity. We will move slowly, step by step, exploring what it was like for ordinary people to live through such a time. What they ate, what they saw when they opened their doors each morning, what they hoped for, and what they feared. In this first part, we will spend a day in the life of someone living in a medieval town as the plague arrived. You will imagine yourself waking, walking, and working among narrow streets and timbered houses, carrying the quiet awareness that something is not right. So, settle in, allow your breath to slow, and let the noise of the present fade as we take this long, calm journey into the past. Surviving the Black Death, a day in a plague-stricken town. Imagine yourself in the middle of a medieval town in the summer of 1348. The air is warm, heavy with the mixed scents of baking bread, wood smoke, and damp earth. The streets are narrow, their surfaces uneven, made of packed dirt and cobblestones. The houses lean toward one another as if in conversation, their timber frames creaking softly in the wind. You wake in a small, dimly lit room, a single window covered with oiled parchment, letting in only a soft glow of morning light. The bedding beneath you is rough but warm, stuffed with straw. Outside, you hear the distant sounds of a market beginning to stir, the clatter of a cartwheel, the call of a vendor setting out his wares. Life in this town is familiar, rhythmic. Each day begins early. Perhaps you are a craftsman, and your tools are neatly laid out beside you. Or perhaps you are a simple laborer, rising to help unload goods from the arriving wagons. But today feels slightly different. The streets are quieter than usual. There are fewer voices outside, and those you hear are hushed. In recent weeks, whispers have begun to spread. Merchants arriving from distant ports have brought troubling news of a sickness that travels from place to place faster than any army. Some say it began far away, in the lands beyond the Black Sea, traveling with caravans of traders. Others insist it is a punishment, a kind of divine reckoning. As the day goes on, you make your way through the streets. You notice the faces of your neighbors. Some look pale and tired. A family has shuttered their house entirely, and no one has seen them outside for days. The town physician, a learned man dressed in long robes, moves from door to door with an anxious expression. The town smells different now, too. Alongside the familiar scents of bread and animals, there is a sharper, acrid smell of burning. Herbs, perhaps, set alight in an attempt to cleanse the air. Some households hang bunches of fragrant plants, rosemary or lavender, by their doors. People carry pomanders, small bowls filled with spices, and hold them close to their noses. As you pass the town square, you see that the market stalls are sparsely filled. Prices have risen for grain and meat, for fewer traders are willing to travel the roads. The air feels still, as though the town is holding its breath. In the evenings, bells ring more often than they used to. Each peal marks another passing. You might have heard the chants of priests offering prayers, walking in slow procession through the streets. Some days, groups of flagellants arrive, men dressed in simple cloth, chanting hymns, striking themselves with whips as they march, believing their penance might drive the sickness away. For those who remain healthy, the days are a balancing act between fear and necessity. Work must go on. The fields must be tended, the animals cared for, the bread baked. Yet each knock on the door brings worry that news has come of another friend, another neighbor who has been taken ill. At night, you return to your small house. The room feels quieter than ever before. The air is thick and still, lit only by the warm flicker of a tallow candle. You pull your blanket close, listening to the faint sounds of the street. Footsteps, a dog barking somewhere in the distance, the slow toll of the church bell. There is fear, yes, but there is also a strange rhythm to these days. You become accustomed to the prayers, the smoke of burning herbs, the cautious way people look at one another. Life does not stop completely. People still greet each other, still share bread, still speak of tomorrow. And so you lie down and close your eyes, hoping that when morning comes, your world will still be as it was the night before. The journey of the flagellants, processions of penance. As the weeks pass, the sound of distant chanting becomes more familiar. Imagine yourself standing quietly by the roadside as a group approaches from the far end of the street. At first, you hear the slow, rhythmic sound of footsteps and voices singing in unison. Soon, you see them. A procession of men dressed in simple robes, some wearing hoods, others with their heads bare, their faces solemn. These are the flagellants, travelers who have dedicated themselves to a public act of penance. They believe that the plague is a sign of divine anger, a punishment for the sins of mankind. Their journey is their attempt to atone, not just for themselves, but for everyone. The procession moves slowly, almost like a funeral march. The men carry wooden crosses and banners painted with images of Christ. Their chants are low and steady, repeating lines of prayer. Every few steps they stop, kneel and bow their heads. Some begin to strike their backs with knotted cords or simple whips, leaving faint dark marks on their tunics. The townspeople gather silently to watch. Some cross themselves, some murmur prayers of their own. A few even join the procession for a short time, walking alongside, hoping to share in its protective power. The presence of the flagellants is both comforting and unsettling, a reminder that the world has been shaken, but also that people are seeking ways to make sense of it. Their journeys are long and difficult. They travel from town to town, often barefoot, sleeping in barns, fields, or the charity of a monastery. They rely on offerings of bread and water from the people they visit. Sometimes they are welcomed as holy men, believed to bring healing and protection. Other times they are turned away by town leaders who fear that their gatherings might spread the sickness further. As you follow the procession with your imagination, picture them stopping in the town square at dusk. A small crowd forms as they arrange themselves in a circle. There is no shouting, no fanfare, just the soft sound of prayers and the rustle of cloth. When they have finished, they rest quietly, some sitting on the ground with heads bowed, others tending to simple wounds or murmuring softly among themselves. It is not a joyous ritual, but there is a kind of peace in its rhythm, a slow, deliberate pattern that repeats in every town they pass. For those watching, it can bring a moment of reflection, even comfort, to see such devotion. When the flagellants leave the next morning, the town feels slightly different. Perhaps there is a lingering sense of solemnity, or perhaps a brief feeling of reassurance, as though their prayers might have left behind a shield against the plague. Life resumes, but the memory of the chanting stays with you. The road they travel stretches on across fields, through forests, over hills, and as they move away, you are left standing in the stillness of the early morning, listening to the last faint notes of their song fade into the distance. Centuries have passed since the Black Death swept across Europe, yet the earth has kept its quiet memory of those days. To understand the scale of what happened, archaeologists have turned their attention to the burial grounds where entire communities laid their dead to rest. Imagine standing at the edge of such a site today. It is quiet, often located just beyond the boundary of a medieval town or in a field that has long since grown over with grass and wildflowers. At first glance, it may look like any other piece of countryside, but beneath the soil lie layers of history. When archaeologists begin to excavate, they move slowly, carefully brushing away earth that has lain undisturbed for centuries. What they uncover is not a single burial, but long trenches where the dead were laid side by side, sometimes dozens, sometimes hundreds together. These were not ordinary cemeteries. They were plague pits, created when there were too many dead to bury in the usual way. The discovery of these sites has given historians a clearer picture of how towns and villages responded to the overwhelming crisis. In ordinary times, each person might have been buried with ceremony, with prayers said at their side and candles lit to mark their passing. But in these extraordinary years, necessity took precedence. Priests could not keep pace. Gravediggers worked without rest, and entire families were laid to rest together. Despite the somber reality, the work of studying these graves is done with great care and respect. Archaeologists document each layer, recording details that help us understand who these people were, their ages, their health, the traces of their lives. Sometimes objects are found alongside them, a rosary, a simple ring, the fragments of clothing. Through this quiet, meticulous work, patterns begin to emerge. The plague did not strike evenly. Some communities were devastated, losing half or more of their population. Others fared better, with only a few taken. Scientists today have even been able to study the remains of the bacteria itself, preserved in teeth and bones, unlocking secrets about how the disease spread and why it was so deadly. Standing in the present, looking at these carefully uncovered graves, it is hard not to reflect on the passage of time. The people who were laid here once walked the same streets, heard the same bells, felt the same fears as those we imagined earlier. Now their story is part of the earth, slowly and quietly shared with those who seek to understand. The memory of these plague pits is sobering, but there is also something peaceful about them now. Grass grows over them, birds sing in the trees nearby, and the world that once felt as though it was ending has long since continued. From these quiet resting places, our attention now turns to the other side of life during this era, to those who lived not in fear and poverty, but in prayer, comfort, and service. Life in the cloister, the monastic world, during the plague now. Imagine yourself leaving the busy streets of the town behind and walking along a quiet country road. After some time, you see the walls of a monastery rising ahead. Tall stone, pale against the sky, enclosing a place set apart from the outside world. You pass through the gate and step into the cloister. The air here feels still, as though time moves differently inside these walls. The sounds are softer, the rustle of robes, the faint echo of footsteps on stone, the distant call of a bell marking the passing hours. Life in a monastery follows a careful rhythm. The day is divided into periods of prayer, work, and study. At dawn, the monks rise from their narrow beds and gather in the chapel for the first prayers of the day. The space is cool and dim, lit only by candles. Their voices rise and fall in quiet unison, creating a slow, steady chant that fills the room like the sound of flowing water. After prayers, the monks move to their tasks. Some tend the gardens, growing herbs and vegetables that will feed the community. Others copy texts by hand in the scriptorium, sitting at long wooden desks, their quills scratching gently across parchment. Some are tasked with caring for the sick, both within the monastery and in the surrounding villages. During the time of the plague, the monastery became a place of both refuge and risk. Pilgrims and the desperate often came seeking comfort, asking for prayers or hoping for a miracle. Some monasteries opened their infirmaries, providing what care they could, though the illness often spread to the brothers themselves. Records tell of entire monastic communities that were wiped out, their cloisters falling silent for years afterward. Even in these dark days, the routine continued. The bells still rang, summoning the monks to prayer 7 times a day. They still walked in slow procession around the cloister, heads bowed, hands folded, their sandals whispering against the stone floor. Mealtimes were simple and quiet, often eaten in silence while one brother read aloud from scripture. For the monks who survived, there must have been a deep sense of endurance, that their purpose was to remain a steady flame of devotion, even as the world outside felt as though it were collapsing. The walls of the cloister offered both protection and a reminder of duty. As evening fell, the final prayer service was held. The candles burned low, their light warm against the cold stone. The chanting was slower now, more solemn. And when it was done, the monks would retire to their cells, closing their doors softly and letting the silence of the night settle over the monastery. Here, away from the noise of the town and the fear of the marketplace, life had a quiet, unbroken rhythm. It was a different kind of survival, one rooted in faith, discipline, and the hope that, in time, the plague would pass and the world beyond the walls would bloom again. And so, as we leave the monastery and the cloister fades behind us, we return once more to the present. The streets we walked, the bells we heard, the prayers and processions we imagined, they all belong to a world far removed from ours, yet not so distant that we cannot feel its echoes. The Black Death changed everything for those who lived through it, reshaping their towns, their beliefs, and their futures. Yet they endured. They kept baking bread, ringing bells, planting fields, and saying their prayers. As you rest now, perhaps you can take comfort in this thought, that even in the hardest times, life continues its quiet rhythm, and morning eventually comes. Allow yourself to breathe deeply and slowly. Let the sounds and images of the past drift away, leaving you in the stillness of this moment. The world outside is calm. You are safe, warm, and at peace.